Hello and welcome to this video. And as you can see, I have before me an absolute legend of guitar, a legend of jazz, Mr. Stanley Jordan. I am not worthy. So lovely to be
Oh,
talking
thank
to
you.
you today.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, I think incredible. And some of you who watch your channel will know that my partner in crime, Mr. Roy Marchbank, is in the interview today. It's not really interviewed with the in the music talk. And those will know have seen Roy play will know he's another guitarist that has pushed the envelope. And he has always said to me the thing that made him go that little bit beyond on the guitar was seeing Mr. Stanley Jordan. So, Roy, could you just tell us about that experience and we'll kick off there?
Yeah, where do I start that one? Yeah, well, I mean, I've been playing guitar since I was 3 years old. And I kind of got to a level, I would say I was fairly proficient by the time I was 20. But I'd never dawned on me to try and explore and find my own voice. I just never thought about doing that. I was a pretty good parrot. I was good at aping a lot of things, and it just didn't. I couldn't find anything else that would inspire me to actually go beyond where I already was. And until, and I'll pull this out just now, this is what I pulled from the archives. It's an old ticket from the Queen's Hall in 1990, Stanley.
Wow.
That's where I saw you, the Queen's Hall in Edinburgh. And I saw you performing there way back. And it was mind blowing. It wasn't just the music. It wasn't just the phenomenal technique. It wasn't just that. What hit me all at once was here's a man that has his own thing going on. He's a pioneer of his own style. He's got his own side, his own sound. It just sounded incredible. And I walked out of that gig with my friend Buddy. It was actually my friend Buddy said, Roy, you're going to have to get your shit together. So, wow. It was absolutely astonishing. What a gig. And that changed my life forever. That set me up to think about what it was that I was going to say. And I hadn't really thought or ventured down that side before. And when I did, the whole world started to open up and I realized my place in it. So thank you, Stanley, for bringing that to my attention when I was just a bit of a kid.
Oh, you're so welcome. And, I think you can relate to this as a musician. One of the best compliments we can get is that somebody was inspired by what we did and use that as an example, not to necessarily copy us, but to find their own way. Music is just so infinite, and there's different levels of infinity. It's transfinite. It's just an infinity of infinities. In math, we call that a Hilbert space, and it's just one of those things that it's way bigger than us. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than you,
Yeah.
and so just being able to explore that is such a joy. And you hear a lot of music out there that doesn't really seem to try to explore very far.
Right.
A lot of music out there is really just trying to find a niche and settle in that niche. And even some of the music that's very high level, very sophisticated, very complex from a structural point of view, highly developed, and yet still we find these sort of manneristic sort of silos and these cul-de-sacs where it gets trapped in a bubble. And I actually think part of that, it's a double-edged sword, because I think that the education system is part of the reason for this. Excuse me. There are two sides to it, because on one side, the education system, especially in jazz today, is so much more developed than it was when I was starting out, and I love that. But at the same time, education is a business, and the business of education has created these structures. Not that we didn't have them before, but I feel like it's almost like it used to be that people would make music, and then theorists, musicologists would try to understand or try to define. Okay, what did those musicians just do? Let's try to codify it. Let's try to classify it. And all that's good. I love that. I'm very left brain myself, you know. But what we have now so often is we start with that. We say, okay, I'm going to do an example of X. Okay, so how does one do X? Okay, so I guess I better learn this. I guess I better learn that, and I need to stay in those structures.
Yeah.
Is that ringing true for you?
Yeah. Excuse me. The way that I kind of found myself out of a pretty dark space musically was by trying to forget everything that I'd learned. And I found when I open tuned the guitar and used alternate tunings, I was just
Mm-hmm.
left with raw technique, and for some reason I was able to bypass everything that was, talking in my head and just connect with something that is otherworldly. I felt was just, and this way that I feel, this is how I feel in some ways kind of fake because I don't really feel the music is mine. It's almost like it's in loan. You pick these things up from whatever you've learned, everything round about
Right.
you, and it's coming in from everywhere else. And when it happens, it's like, wow, well, where did that come from? What's all that about? And when I found I was in these open tunings and alternate tunings, that would happen easily. I could just be in a quiet space. I could let the music come in. I would be able to develop something that I could kind of hear in my head, and it would just expand from there. So in a way, what I was trying to do was to break down the doors in much the same way as what I suppose Bruce Lee was trying to say was like, no style is style, and
Mm.
take in as much as I could from whatever was outside there, bring it into something and push that forward.
No,
Um,
and I think what Roy is describing is 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 an aspect of creativity which I felt you really represented when you first emerged. It was like everyone was
mm,
listening to different guitar players. We had all our heroes. And then when you came out, it was as though someone had just come from another planet and gone, well, you could do this with the guitar. And I can remember you emerging in the mid 80s. I can remember seeing you on the Tube. I'm sure you remember that performance here, which was sort of mainstream TV, and all the guitarists were like bamboozled in a way. And then your debut
mm.
album came out, and it sold tons. It's one of the biggest selling albums in jazz. So you'd come out of absolutely nowhere, it seemed, with this sort of complete rethink of the guitar. And all my friends were very impressed because it seemed like you got two brains and one hand was playing, playing the guitar like a piano. But the thing that struck me was the harmony. Your harmony was so advanced, and and you were able to improvise harmony and create, like, I suppose polychords. I don't know how we describe them. And I have for decades now. I want to know what was in your head. Did you pick up the guitar and start playing it like this from day one because you just didn't know, or did you play it normally and then think, I want to be able to do this? Can you tell us a little bit the process and what drove it, especially around the harmony as well? Because
Hmm.
as a musician, when I saw you do it, I thought he's doing this for the harmony. He's not just doing it to show off. He's reaching to it's the ability to improvise on your own. It was the improvisational fact, the fact that you could go off almost like Art Tatum. You could take off on your own, supported. So, how did that come about?
Oh, great question. Thank you so much. And one of the things I love about watching the videos that you've put out is I appreciate your insights and your ability to sort of get to the heart of the matter and see the hidden gem that maybe others sometimes miss.
It's
And
you, Stanley. It's not me. It's you. I've got ears, and I listened to you, and we were enthralled. Roy would be exactly the same. The gift
Absolutely.
you've given is just such an incredible thing, and you're such a special player, to our generation, and I think it's so important to give you that back because you're a pioneer. So, but how where's it come from? What was the initial thought that made you do it? Because it requires courage, doesn't it?
Yeah, I just thought about humorous way to put it is if you're a pioneer, you could end up with a pie in face. Because I mean, the thing is, I remember early on, and I was talking to. This is when I was in New York, trying to build my profile and trying to get around and meet musicians and just get into the scene. And I talked to a very accomplished and successful guitarist, and he said, "So what is it that you want to do?" And I said, "I just want to do all kinds of stuff. I want to play all kinds of music." And he said, "Well, you can't do that. You have to pick a style. It's not a musical issue. I don't doubt musically that you could do that, but on a career level, you have to pick a style. That's just how the industry works." And so I was kind of like, "Oh yeah, watch this." And so I had this sort of strategy for how I was going to get out there as a musician who wasn't married to any particular style, even though jazz is my core, it's my favorite, but to be able to sort of go in any direction. And I think I was off to a pretty good start with that, but then the forces of conformity started to sort of close in on me, and I started to take a lot of heat for some of the things that I was doing. And that's when I realized that we have, I think, a kind of an aesthetic crisis in the jazz world because of this certain way of thinking that things have to fall into these categories. And don't get me wrong, I like the categories. So for example, if I'm trying to establish a certain style, I might use cliches, to get into a certain zone. Like I might go, and get my sound going. Can you hear me there?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're very honoured to having you play today. You're the first guest to do this, so it's an incredible thing. My little legs are going up and down, Roy.
Yeah.
I'm trying
the
to
same.
contain this.
Now, do you hear the guitar cutting in and out right now?
That's all good.
No, that's good.
Now it's not doing it, boy. Okay, now it stopped. I don't know what's going on with my rig here. Okay, if I were to do something like this. Okay, so something like that, that's very much like in the zone of like a jazz, like a swing groove, like, 2-5-1s, 1-6-2-5s, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So that's all fine and good. And so I might start with something like that in order to establish that frame of I'm working within that musical world. But then it's interesting for me to try to go outside that or to try to broaden it a little bit. So for example, let's say that I'm in G and I'm just doing your typical 2-5-1. Okay, so I'm going to A minor 7 to D7 to G major 7. Maybe I'll do a 6 or something, whatever. Okay. So I start out, let's say, with so I'm putting a C major 7 on top of that, which makes it an A minor 9. Okay, all good so far, pretty normal. And then when I go to the D7, the whole thing with the D7 is what we're calling a dominant, and I'm not crazy about that use of that term dominant.
And why is that? Why is that, Stanley? Why don't you like the term dominant?
Well, because it seems to me that the chord you're resolving to, the key you're actually in, that seems like that should be called the dominant. But anyway, it's all right. Whatever.
You are left-brained. I love it.
But anyway, okay. So D7, which is the official, dominant of G. So now, the main thing about this is that it's unstable because we have, first of all, the F sharp to C, both of which tones are unstable over the G major tonality, right? But also there's a tritone. So the interval itself is unstable. So for two reasons that wants to resolve. So a typical thing, I could resolve it like this. I could resolve it like that, for example. Okay. But the main point here is that we've got something unstable that resolves to something stable. And so we could broaden that idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be a D7. So, what about a D flat major 7? So let's try that. And I could even put that on top of the other one. And so
great.
The polytonal contrast of the C sharp major 7 over the D7 creates this. It creates this like intense tension, and then we resolve that tension, right? And in fact, that chord, that C sharp major 7, all of those notes are a half step away from notes of the G major 7. So the C sharp can go up, the G sharp can go down, the C can come down to a B, and the F natural can go up to an F sharp. So I can go, and so that's it's functionally a dominant. It's functionally a resolving chord, right? And so the sky's the limit. There's nothing that I can't do. In fact, I could even think of it like this. It's easier to think of what won't work than what will. So in other words, over the D7, I've got 12 different pitch classes that I could play. Everyone knows the term pitch class. Pitch class is just a note regardless of what octave it's in, right? So there's 12 options, right? Right? So I can go to each one. Well, the D, that's obvious. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, it's fine. Right? Now this one, it doesn't sound dissonant, but it's unstable. Like it kind of messes with the F sharp. The D7 has this F sharp, and then putting a G on top, it kind of bullies that F sharp. It just sits on top of it and squashes it. So let's say, okay, let's not use the G. Now in another case, I might do a suspended D7 or something, but that's not what I'm going for now. Let's keep going. All good. Okay, now this one, I realize that I used it before. This is C sharp, and I used it before, but I'm hearing a little differently now. And this, we have the same issue. The C sharp bullies the C. So let's say we don't use that. So now we've only really thrown out 2 notes, right? So what we actually have is a 10-note scale that I can use over this D7 chord, right? And the thing is, with scales, every time you add a note, you're doubling the number of possibilities, right? Because it's all the possibilities with that note and without that note, right? And so, like, typically, most conventional music is based on 7-note scales. So you double it to get to 8. You double it again to get to 9. You double it again to get to 10. So you have 8 times as many possibilities with the 10-note scale as you had with the 7-note scale. It's just this huge universe of possibilities.
And also what's interesting is that a lot of musicians will be thinking, oh, I don't want to play that note because it's wrong. Whereas you're thinking, I want to play that note because it's right. It's a completely different way of seeing it, isn't it? That you're not, you've only got rid of 2 notes. That's a complete different mental state, isn't it?
And we could easily say that we get to decide what's wrong and right.
Yeah.
I think that as long as I think there are sort of musical rules that it's hard to articulate in a sort of left brain way, but it's like your right brain knows.
Hmm.
You know, so one of the things I tell my students is in life, in everything you do in life, there's a fundamental question. And if you can answer that question, then you can master that situation. And so, for example, if you're a composer or arranger, a fundamental question is, how should the song go next? Right? Because if you're someone who's always seems to have a good answer to that question, then you know you're good at that. You're a good composer, arranger, improviser, or whatever. And so then I'll say to my students, okay, you're in luck because I'm going to tell you the answer right now to that question. And the answer is the song should continue what it's been doing unless there's some reason to change.
Hmm.
And I love that because that it's just at the right level, because it can apply to pretty much any style of music. And the flexibility comes in where, well, what do you mean by reason to change? What's a reason? And that's where you get to decide what kind of way of thinking or approaching things that you're going to bring to it. So it might be, for example, that it's strictly intuitive or strictly visceral. Like when you hear it and it sounds to you like it's time for a change, that's a good reason to change, you know. Or maybe you're spinning out a certain symmetrical progression or something, and you get to the end of that progression, then you have to change because you're done. You finished what you were doing, so you have to come up with something else. You know, there's all kinds of different reasons you can bring into it, but unless you have a reason to do something different, you're better off just continuing as you've been going. And that relates to so many things, you know. Like I might have a voicing scheme here where I've got three notes down here and then one note up here. So I'm creating a certain texture. There's basically two parts to the texture. There's an upper part with a single note, and then there's a lower part with three notes. And in a way, that lower part, just one question, am I distorting? Is my
No,
No,
you're
voice
fine. You're
no, you're
absolutely
fine.
no. It's lovely. Yeah.
okay?
No, it's
Okay. So there's a lower part, but that lower part also has two subparts because I'm going. So the lower part has got a bass note, and then it's got these two notes. So there's actually sort of three parts in a way, but the bottom two parts are really close. They're much closer together than that top part. So it's really sort of two parts. Okay, so
Hmm.
we can build these textural sort of hierarchies. And the point is that once I've established this, and this is a kind of an unusual texture, especially on guitar, right? And so once I've established that, then I should probably keep that going. So maybe, you know,
Mm.
um, you know. So
Yeah.
I keep that going, and then that progression naturally took me into this final thing, which you think is going to be the resolution, but it's a kind of a deceptive cadence in a way, because we've got the Lydian, the tritone
yeah.
thing on top, and then I'm not messing with you, and I'm not trying to hurt you here, so I kind of go ahead and resolve that next.
Right.
You know, I'm not
Right.
going for shock value at this moment. So, so the point is, there was a reason to change that. Once I hit this last one, because I've had the two hands together, always playing rhythmically in sync, and then once I hit this, there's this real interesting sound, but it felt like it needed to still resolve. So then I changed it where now only the top note is initiating a different movement, whereas the bottom three notes are just staying where they are. So, you know, things like that. We can take any aspect of music and we
Hmm.
can find that the fundamental principle is whatever you got going, if it's good, you know what they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, just keep it going. Or, you know, one of my all-time favorite musicians to work with, Bernard Wright, who was just a master of funk. and there's sort of a almost a sort of a religion of funk, you know. And he explained the basic concept of funk is if you take something and that's already funky and you repeat it, then it just got funkier. You know, so it's that concept of consistency,
Hmm.
um, and it's almost like hypnotic in a way, and then it starts to become spiritual in a way
Hmm.
too, because if you go to some school of contemplative spiritual, um, you know, practice or philosophy, they're they're not going to hit you with a whole bunch of doctrine right away. They're just going to say, sit there quietly and meditate.
Hmm.
And what is the meditation? Well, a meditation is just staying with one thing and finding a whole universe. You go deeper and deeper into one thing, you find a whole universe in there. And if that one thing happens to be a mantra, for example, so what is a mantra meditation? A mantra meditation is just repeating a sound over and over again. Well, we musicians already do that. We call it rehearsal, right? And so it really is just a question of taking what we already do
Hmm.
and deepening it, or approaching it with a deeper level of reverence.
Right.
And then that's when that magic starts to come through that the audience really picks up on, and they start to feel like this isn't just a regular, you know, a musician solved a crossword puzzle and came up with an interesting fugue or whatever. This is something that's deeper than the structure.
Right. I remember when you recorded well, when I listened to your recording and Magic Touch of the cover of Eleanor Rigby, there was a part of that when you'd played the tune around, you kind of went off on almost like an improvised vibe and then brought yourself back into the tune again. It was absolutely magical. It was like you just went exploring into the cosmos and then came back into the tune. That was one of my favorite versions I've ever heard of that tune. Is that kind of like what you're talking about when you're in the recording environment and you just go off and you go wherever it's taking you? Was that completely improvised when you recorded that?
It was, yeah. Okay, I
Wow.
have to ask you, is my guitar cutting in and out right now? Wait.
No,
No. It's all
it's
it's
good
all
this side.
it's sounding incredible, and it's like when we first started up before we hit record, and you were just testing your sound, and I assume you were improvising. My hair stood on end because you have an ability to just go off with where you want to go. You're not being led. It feels multi-dimensional to me. And
Yeah.
so your talk from the sort of very sort of localized, this is the guitar neck, these are the notes, so I can get this, and then very quickly you're almost in the universe, and you're in the in these sort of more metaphysical realms, and I find that fascinating. And I felt that when I first saw you play. I remember seeing you on the tube, and then there was the Blue Note concert with Herbie Hancock and Freddie Hubbard, and that came out on the TV. That was a very important video, and you were in there, and I think you did that blues thing in there, and it was
Yeah,
really
thank you.
incredible. And I was very impressed with the fact that you were drawing on, not just the jazz tradition, but you would have Beatles songs in there, and Stairway to Heaven, Led Zeppelin. You seem to pull from all sorts of different areas. What were your initial influences? I mean, how old were you when you started playing the guitar, and how did that start up?
So I started playing piano when I was 3, but I didn't take lessons until I was 7. But we had a piano in the house, and my sister was a little older, and she was taking piano lessons, so she'd get up there and she'd play, and then I'd get up and just experiment. And I love that. I love the fact that I learned as a just another kind of play. You know, I'd play with toys, I'd play with blocks, I'd play and build sandcastles, and I played music. You know, and I think that that's a good way to learn, just exploring and having fun. So then when I started taking lessons, I remember that there was one point where I had I was supposed to have learned my scales in all keys, and I didn't really practice that week. And I tried to bluff my way through, and I was not successful. I was so busted. But the interesting thing was that as I was trying to play the scale, and I noticed that if I hit the wrong note, I knew right away that that note was wrong, and I could tell if it was too high or too low. And I thought that was so interesting that like the teacher was teaching me based on the notation and the fingering, and I realized that I can hear these things. It's actually in my ear.
Mm.
And so I know that they've got the Suzuki method that, since then other approaches have come along that's more of a sort of a whole person approach. But this was an early experience of me kind of getting there on my own. And I think that all those years of just experimentation helped to prepare me to be an improvising musician. And I wanted to play guitar. I got a guitar for Christmas when I was 6, but nobody knew how to help me get it going. And I actually was trying to tune it up. I had no idea what I was doing. I broke 3 strings on the guitar, and I didn't know what to do. And I remember, so my mother used to listen to this talk radio. This was out in the San Francisco Bay Area. And it was the big talk radio show, Dave McElhatton. And this was during the height of the Vietnam War, and people were talking about all sorts of political and social issues and stuff. It was a real serious kind of a thing. And I called in the show, and I actually got in. and so my mother was upstairs, and she heard my voice come on the radio. And I said, I have a guitar, and I broke 3 strings on the guitar, and I just wanted to know like what I should do. And so here was this guy who, bless his heart, he could expound on all the big issues of the day, but he didn't know to tell me, just go to a music store. They will help you, you know? So that was kind of cute because my mom came downstairs like, Stanley, was that you?
Oh,
So anyway, that was,
there's
yeah.
something quite profound in that because my daughter started playing the guitar. She picked up my guitar, she started playing it, and she's literally been playing it for 6 hours a day. And she's learning all the chords and picking it up. She's getting on the internet, but also when I sit listening, she's making her own stuff up as well, and it's strange. And
Oh,
she came in today, and she got my plectrum, and she said, why can't I have 2 plectrums? And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, can't I stick them together? And then she went off and she got 2 plectrums. She's got some blue tack, and she made this little plectrum up with so she's now got 2 plectrums like that. So when she strummed, she was after this double strumming, and I thought, you're going to play the guitar because it's that aspect, that childlike aspect of going, I'm doing this. I want to see what it's like because I said it won't work. It won't work. Be the grown up. It won't work. But she did it, and she'd go, no, Dad, it's really good. And I thought, this,
oh, I love that.
that is what it is. The thing you said about play, children's play, it is very profound. It's very
Hmm.
profound, and that's these very simple things and having a very simplistic view of it. But actually,
Hmm.
within that, you can sort of expand that out to a whole multi-dimensional thing. That's fascinating. Roy, have you got a
Yeah.
question? I don't want to hog it because
Well, I just wanted to
sorry,
complete
sorry,
the
Stanley.
story that I was saying. No problem. So that was the end of that phase of my guitar career. It didn't take off. So finally, when I was 11, I got my parents once again to get me a guitar, and this time it stuck. I knew I was ready. A lot of music I was getting into, blues and rock and roll and stuff, was very guitar oriented. I knew that I wanted to play guitar, and I was ready. So they got me the guitar, and I remember staying up late because it was Christmas Eve, and I had the guitar already. And it came with this book, a basic book on how to tune the guitar. And it explained you tune the low pitch string to wherever it sounds good, and then you tune from there to fifth fret, fifth fret. So once I understood the pattern, I put the book down and I tuned the whole guitar up in fourths because I just went fifth fret all the way across. So then I was trying to play these chords in the book, and the chords sounded horrible. And this went on for like over an hour. I was trying to understand, like, there's moments when the world just doesn't make sense, and you're too young to cope, and it's traumatic, you know. And so I finally looked at the book again and realized, oh, there's that one place where you tune at the fourth fret. Oh, okay. So now I understood what my teachers were trying to explain to me. Follow directions,
No, it's brilliant.
right? And so from then on, I played in standard tuning and everything made sense. And I played for like 5 years in standard tuning. But that fourth tuning was always in my head because that's the first way that I ever tuned a guitar. And when I started really getting into jazz and wanting to learn my chords all up and down the fingerboard, um, I realized that if I went back to fourth tuning, it would simplify the fingerings. And so I started to think about maybe I should really seriously consider that. So that's another subject which I'm happy to talk about. But
So how old were you when you moved over to fourth tuning then?
so I guess I was like about 15.
And have you ever changed? Have you ever used any other tunings apart from fourth tuning since?
Occasionally I've experimented with alternate tunings a little bit, but not so much. I mean, I love the fourth tuning so much that it's pretty much been my tuning all along. And Roy, I can relate to something you were saying earlier when you were talking about how different tunings can stimulate your creativity. I remember
Mm.
this one time I was trying to do a recording session, and it was just one of those days when I couldn't play a creative note to save my life. I don't know what was wrong with me, but I was completely on the left side of my brain, and I just couldn't get the vibe going. I couldn't get a
Right.
groove. Um, so I tried all kinds of things to stimulate my creativity. And one of the things I tried was, well, why don't I change my strings? So I changed the strings, and I was tuning up the new strings, and the new strings were completely out of tune. And I started playing on the strings. It wasn't even like an alternate tuning per se, it was just completely out. And I
Yeah.
played something, and it sounded interesting. I'm like, oh, that's
Right.
cool. I played it again, and I did a variation on it. And
Yeah.
then I did a variation on the variation. And next thing you know, I flipped to the other side where
Right.
it was so creative. I was just like flying up and down the guitar and coming up with this stuff that was so amazing that
Mm.
I couldn't even like reach out to hit the record button. Like
Yeah.
by the time I was able to actually hit record, the thing was already had peaked and it was already sort of over.
Yeah.
So I didn't really capture like the magic of that, but it was a real life-changing moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what was happening is I had this split, and so the split was still there, but I just flipped from one side to the other,
Right.
and I felt like after that, this whole like right side of my face felt like it was like glowing. It was like so hot, and I actually had somebody independently verify that yeah, the right side was definitely warmer. So I know for sure that the right side of my brain is definitely the creative side.
Right. Right. Yeah, it is really interesting when you get into especially when you don't know the alternate tuning or the open tuning and you have no idea what's going on. And like we are talking about getting creative with that because you forget everything that you've learned previously and you're just left with this blank canvas of knowing nothing. But it's in that moment of not knowing anything that things are kind of born. So you get that kernel and you record that kernel, whatever it is, then go back to the tuning that you know and try and figure out what you're doing in the tuner that you know so you can orchestrate it. So you've got something that was birthed from something that really shouldn't have been there, if you know what I mean, if that makes any sense. It's
Makes sense.
yeah, it's really exciting.
One of the composers I studied with when I was an undergrad at Princeton was Jim Randall. And one interesting thing that he said to me one day is that he was very anti-technique
Hmm.
because he said that when you have technique, you have a tendency to use the technique and not really answer the question about the music. Like,
Hmm.
where does the music really want to go? What is the most musical thing that I can do right here? You
Hmm.
get caught up in your technique. And just sort of going back to, I was talking earlier about the crisis in criticism. Um, and I think that I've unfairly been accused of being one of those people who got caught up in technique. And for me, yes, I do have my technique. I do use it, but I could go through a whole gig. I could play 3 gigs in a row, and not once for a minute it occurs to me that I'm playing the guitar in an unusual way,
Yeah.
because I'm so accustomed to it. I've been doing it for so long, and then somebody points it out. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That is kind of weird, isn't it? But I'm all about thinking about the music, and there's a little bit of an irony there, and
Hmm.
I don't want to dwell on my um, issues with the establishment. Not that I'm averse to or that I hate talking about it. It's just that I don't want to get sidetracked if that's not
Sure.
that interesting for our conversation. But for me, like, I think in a way, because I was doing something interesting, some of the conventional thinking people weren't sure how to listen to it or what to listen for or
Yeah.
how to understand it. And again, going back to Jim Randall, um, Jim Randall said that essentially all sound is music, or all sound could be music if you're able to perceive it in a musical way. And so if he listens to something and he doesn't like it, it's not necessarily that it was bad music. It's like maybe he didn't have a way of hearing it in which the value of that music came through for him.
Hmm.
And I really took that to heart, because I realized that when you're when you're accustomed to different styles of music and sort of navigating different styles, you kind of do that automatically.
Hmm.
Like if you're playing blues, the criteria that you are that determines what sounds good is different from the criteria. If you're in a Mahavishnu cover band, for example, and
Hmm.
you play a great solo, the criteria for that solo is really different
Hmm.
from playing a BB King tune or something. So
Yeah.
you get accustomed to sort of putting on different ears for different kinds of music. And to me, that's part of the fun of it, is to figure out, like, how do I how can I listen to this to get the juice, to get the joy of this.
Yeah.
And I think that in some cases, like if I would play something really fast, then the conventional people would say, oh, Stanley's all technique, he's just showing off his chops. And then I'd play something really melodic and really sweet and with a lot of little nuances,
Yeah.
and they would say, oh, Stanley's selling out, you know
You can't
he's
win.
you know what I mean? It's like you can't win.
It's true. You really can't. Yeah, I've been in that position myself quite a
But
few times, Stanley, but that's really interesting. You should bring that up.
But I mean, I would talk to my mother about this. Like some people, you tell them, you read a review and they're like, they just didn't get it. It's not so much
Hmm.
like, okay, not everyone's gonna like your music. Okay, I get that.
Hmm.
But what would bother me is that sometimes they really just didn't get it. And I feel like
Yeah.
if they really got where I was coming from, then they'd be in a much better position to decide, did I pull it off or not?
Yeah.
It's like you hand someone an apple and they're like, oh, that's the worst tasting orange I've ever had. You know what I mean? It's like, well, let's
Yeah.
let's let's establish, what we're trying to do here. And sometimes I think that I would be viewed more like an object, and so it wouldn't even occur to them. Well, why don't I have an interview with Stanley, and ask Stanley, like, what is
Exactly.
your what are you trying what's up.
Hmm.
And so anyway, so then I talked to my mother about that, because like when I talk to musicians would say, oh, don't read that stuff, don't pay attention to that. um, you know um, Even people like Winton would say, oh, those people don't know what the fuck they're talking about or whatever. But then I talked to my mother, and my mother, who was a writer, and she had wanted to be a journalist, but back in the 50s they said, well, you're a black woman, you can't be a journalist. But deep down she had this affinity for that world, and
Hmm.
so she would understand what I was talking about, and she would say, well, to me, I don't think that they're doing their job as a journalist, because I think they should talk to you. And then I started to evolve this idea that maybe we have a bit of a crisis on the aesthetic side.
Mm.
And there was this period in the 90s when I took a long break from the whole scene, and I started to have more time on my hands, and I started reading some things that maybe I didn't have time to read before. And I particularly took an interest in aesthetic philosophy and the philosophy of art. And I had this epiphany, like, oh my God, all this stuff that I'm reading here, this should be the theoretical foundation for marketing in the arts. Like, all the questions that they're asking are exactly the kind of questions that we should be asking when we determine, like, how to market a work of art. How do we bridge that gap between what the artist creates and what the public buys?
Right.
And got so many ideas and so many insights, and it prepared me much more for dealing with the realities of the world. Like that person who told me, well, you can't play more than one style of music. And I found out the hard way that the industry really doesn't want to let you play more than one style of music. But then I thought, well, maybe I could approach it a little bit differently, armed with these new concepts. And basically, what I got from that whole um, exploration that I was doing in the early 90s, what I got from that is that the whole concept of aesthetic philosophy is all about values, aesthetic values. And if you're actually doing philosophy, you might argue about what those values should be and all that. And that's all fine and good. That's sort of the foundation of that. But if you're applying it, sort of the applied aesthetic philosophy basically says, well, the world has these different value scapes. Like over here, they they're interested in these values. Over there, they've got some other values, and there's some overlap. Maybe there are places where they don't even notice, but they're actually appreciating the same values. So there's a commonality between this market and that market. So essentially, I'm looking at things on an internal level instead of an external level. And I'm getting beyond that, all that, when, like in the early 20th century, when they did all that marketing research, that all the demographic analysis and all that, they perfected all that. And on the basis of that research, they came up with marketing as we know it today, right? So you segment the market into these different descriptors, that where you've got this kind of person, you segment the market by age, by race, by socioeconomic status, and all this kind of stuff, right? But all those are external descriptions of people. Whereas what I was looking at was the internal value systems
Mm.
that were operating. And I was realizing that musicians create music based on their aesthetic values. And then they create this external structural acoustic audio final mix that, embodies their values. And people on the industry side, they choose music based on those values. So we're a record company that does, we've got our niche, and we're not trying to go outside that because this is the niche that we know. And
Mm.
so we've got our aesthetic values, and so we're going to market the music that meets our aesthetic values. We're going to
Mm.
choose the artists and the songs um, that we know how to market, and we're going to market to the audience that chooses music based on those shared values. And so you got the artist, the industry, and the audience all making their choices based on aesthetic values. So it's really more of an internal game than an external game. And what I realize is that the function of the music industry should be to take aesthetic values and convert that into economic values. And boom, that's what we should be doing here. And once I hit on that idea, I I felt so much more free
Mm.
and so much more able to basically do whatever I want to do, because I feel really confident that whatever I create, I'm going to find a niche for it. And I'm
Right.
going to figure out how to describe it so that the people who understand the values that I was going for can realize that this is the music for them and that they're
Yeah.
going to want this music.
Right. Right. Exactly that. Exactly that.
What
I think it's go on, sorry.
what's
I don't.
interesting to
Do we
me
have
is
a
it's
do we have a time limit for this conversation?
pardon?
Do we have a time limit for this
No, no,
conversation?
not on my channel. We just keep talking until you get fed up then, Stanley.
All right.
What's
Sorry.
what's interesting to me with that is when people talk about marketing and market, they actually don't analyze what that word means. And the word market actually comes from when industrialization came in. And now you got these huge big factories mass producing stuff. People didn't want to buy it because they trusted the person down in their local market who would make their cake or have their apples, and they go down to see their friend and they trust that person. And
Mhm.
so they counteracted that by inventing these characters, and so we know all these characters, Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben and Mr. Kipling and all these people that try and con you into thinking that some person that you knew has made these cakes in their kitchen and brought them out to you. And it's that con. And I think that's when you apply that to the music industry, what you get is their model is mass production. But they want to fool the audience in that there's an artist. And the
Mhm.
problem is there actually is an artist at the center of it. It's not mass production. There's an
Mhm.
artist, but they want to see it as mass production. So they've got to decide what conveyor belt to stick you on so that you can
Mhm.
churn out the other end. Now, what's fascinating with what you've said about telling your story is you had a hunch about this because, and it turned out to be true because when you signed to Blue Note and Magic Touch came out, I can remember a few years back I did a video which was the biggest selling jazz albums in history. And as I was going down, it's like, because there's kind of blue here, and you got like, I had to take all the Kenny G albums and take them out because there was, he's outsold anybody. But and
Mhm.
then your album was there, and the reason is because you went beyond that jazz audience. You reached out to a
Yeah.
bigger audience with what you would it communicated, and I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why it communicated to people. A lot of the guitarists, a lot of heavy metal guitarists were fascinated by what you were doing because they'd heard Eddie Van Halen and this tapping thing, and then you come out and it's like, oh my God, this is really what you can do with it. I think the jazz people were interested in it. I think the people who liked the tunes that you played, Beatles fans, Led Zeppelin fans, and then the visual aspect, which is I think is communal in people, although it was very complex what you were doing, people could see you and understand it. They go, "Oh my God, he's playing it like a piano type of thing." And so I think you were right, but the incredible success of that album, that must have been a very difficult thing to deal with. Is that right? Did you, I mean, it's like, was that, it's a big success to start off with. I can't think of anybody in the jazz world who's ever had that sort of success on their debut album.
Um, the success was it was good. It wasn't difficult. There were aspects that came from it that were difficult, but basically, I had prepared myself for that. I had a plan and a strategy, and I knew that it would work. I just didn't know how well it would work. It actually worked better than I better than I expected. And just to say, I think there were some things about that Magic Touch album that hit a sweet spot, but there were also just some, I don't want to say accidental because I think that things are in sync in the universe, but there were some things about it that really helped the success a lot. Just sort of aspects of the situation, because Bruce Lundvall was hired to revive Blue Note and also start Manhattan EMI. So it was a major sort of pop with I say pop in a very general sense, label. So it was actually two labels. It was Blue Note and Manhattan EMI. And the thing of it is, when I signed that deal, um, I actually when I first met Bruce Lundvall, um, he was not at Blue Note. He was at Elektra, and Elektra had an imprint, the Elektra Musician label, and I thought that they were doing great music, and that's the label I would have recorded on if I had signed with Bruce in the beginning. But having done my initial album, I did a independent record called Touch Sensitive. And so because I did that independent record, that gave me some familiarity with the production side and the manufacturing side and all that. And so I had a little bit of insight into that. And I noticed that the Electra musician um, album covers, although they were really beautiful and they were really elegant and well done, it represented the music in a really respectful way. But I noticed that it was a two-color print. And so I realized that with the two-color print, the label was actually saving money. And that led me to question what is the actual financial commitment of the label. And Bruce, he was legendary. I mean,
Mm.
in the jazz world, when I was hanging out on the scene and going to jam sessions and everything, I asked the musicians, who should I talk to on the industry side? And in terms of the record companies, the musicians would say, talk to Bruce. He's the only person you should talk to. Bruce is the only one. So he had enormous respect, and he, jazz was his thing. And so what I felt like was that in order to get his expertise on board at the Elektra label, part of the deal was to give him this jazz label that he could do whatever he wanted with. Um, but then I started to think, well, the last thing I want to do is to sign to this label, and then if Bruce leaves for whatever reason, then I'm stuck on a label that doesn't have any commitment to jazz. So I really had to think for a long time. And there was a moment when I decided, okay, I'm going to go for it, because Bruce is the one and I'm ready. There were some things going on in my life too that I needed to, like my daughter was really young, and there were certain things. And so when I finally reached the point where I was ready on a life level, and so I went into Bruce's office with my lawyer and I said, okay, I'm ready to sign this deal. What do we do? And Bruce said, well, before we talk, I have to tell you something. I don't work here anymore. Last night, I got a call from the chairman of Capital Industries. They want me to revive Blue Note Records. They want me to start a major new pop label on the East Coast, and I want you to be the first artist I sign. So
Wow.
give me some time to get this label together, and then I'll get back to you, and we're going to do this. So, I mean, if I had come a day earlier, who knows what would have happened, right? So, like I say, I think that things are in sync. I always call it like surfing the wave. You have to catch the right wave, but you also have to surf in the right place, right? So, so that's why we could call it serendipity or whatever, but I do think that all the stars were in alignment. And so when I made that record, Magic Touch, I actually had two record companies because there was Blue Note, and then there was also the entire promotion staff of Manhattan EMI, and they didn't have a record yet. And so I had two different record companies promoting my record. And they both had
Yeah.
something to prove because it was their first record. And so, that helped. I mean, they did a phenomenal job promoting it. But I have to say that that also definitely helped. So I was in the right place at the right time. Now, I do have to point out that this year is the 40-year anniversary of the release of Magic Touch. And
Mm.
so I wanted this interview to be my first event relating to that. So I appreciate that we're talking about this today because this year I'm going to be doing a lot of things to celebrate that record.
Oh, wow.
This is,
So,
you know what you were talking about,
That's
strange,
incredible.
the sort of serendipity, strange synchronization. I'm sorry to be so rude and jump out while you were talking, but I suddenly had a realization while you were talking that I own about 2,000 albums, and I happened to just grab some vinyl. It was just random vinyl, and it's sat right next to me now. And as you were talking, I thought, oh my God, I remember 40 years ago going into the record shop, and in there was this. And it was a specially priced promotional album for the revamped Blue
Wow.
Note Records. This just happens to be sat right next to me. I didn't get this to do the interview. It just happens to be, and I thought, oh my God, as you were talking, I said, I remember it was good marketing because this came out as a special price. This was £2. Look, 1.99. And so, I went in to buy whatever it was I was buying. Of course, I picked this up on side two of this. We've got the very first Blue Note release, which was Albert Ammons, Mead Lux Lewis. Then we got Miles Davis, Bud Powell, Lou Donaldson, Horace Silver, Song for My Father. That's side two. And when I saw that, I thought, well, I'm going to have to buy this. But on side one, we've got Diane Reeves, Borelli Legrand, Bobby McFerrin, Tommy Smith, and of course Stanley Jordan with your album there. And that is when I can't do it because of my background. But what what's the chances of this being sat next to me? It's so strange. And the thing is,
It's meant to
as
be
you
on there.
and it said this was the 50th anniversary of Blue Note. It says what year did this? Now this came out. This had come out in 1989, actually, when that came out. But yes, 40 years, incredible. And so,
Yeah,
what do you plan to do this year in terms of celebrating this?
well, one thing I want to do is I want to do some celebration concerts in which we play the music of the album, and as many of the people as I can pull together who are still with us. And there's so many stories about the album that I can tell, and unfortunately some of the people aren't with us anymore. But um, I would like to share the music, but also share some of the stories with the audience. People hear the songs and they relate to the song in their own life, what the song meant for them as they were listening to it. But there's other stories of what the music meant for us, the musicians, that people always appreciate when I tell them. And so I've started to do this in some of my concerts lately. And I've had people who've known me for years say, wow, some of those stories I didn't even know. I've known you for all these years. So I feel good about taking this opportunity now to do some retrospectives and maybe take some of the music and maybe play some of the songs a little differently. One of the people who was really a prominent contributor was Al Di Meola, because he was the producer of that album. And I saw him just a couple of weeks ago. I hadn't seen him in years. And I said, this is the 40-year anniversary of the album. And he was really happy to hear that. And hopefully I can talk to him about getting involved on some level in the celebration that we're doing. Just one of the many stories I can tell when we were working on The Lady in My Life. So this was a song that was on Michael Jackson's Thriller, written by Rod Temperton. And this song to me was a sleeper because it was a great song and it wasn't like a big upbeat dance number. And so it didn't get as much attention as some of the other songs on the record. And I thought, I'm going to take that one. And so I decided to put that on my record. Well, Thriller was going strong. In fact, when Magic Touch came out and it hit its peak, Magic Touch peaked at the same time that Thriller was also peaking. And Magic Touch was selling so many copies that it got to the point where it had 100th of the sales of Michael Jackson's Thriller. I mean, that's so much. That is like mind blowing, right? to be just 2 orders of magnitude less than Michael Jackson. I said, wow,
Wow.
I know I've made. That's when I knew I had really made it.
Yeah,
And
rightly so.
by jazz standards, seriously, it really was like phenomenal. So anyway, as we were in the studio, we had this rehearsal, and so all the musicians got together. Onaji Allen Gums was there, to the keyboard guy. It was Omar Hakim on drums, Wayne Brathwaite on bass. And we were rehearsing the tune, and Al was in the rehearsal room, and he said, this is boring. You guys sound like the backing track for Michael Jackson's album. You need to do something different. Do something different with the song. And we were like, yeah, you're right. We should really do something different with this. And then Onaji said, well, it's interesting you say that, because it just so happens that last night I worked up an arrangement of the song. I'd be happy to show you guys. We're like, yeah, of course, show us. So he's pulling sheet music out and handing it out, and we're like getting our parts down, And there's that classic like riff where I mean, on the synth, it's on the synth, but I'll just try to play it on the guitar where it goes, you know. So it's like it's going, you know, you know, and I play my little, you know, and right at that point where like I came up with that riff, but the da 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 that was on Ajay, and right there was a moment when the song really started to gel and the arrangement started to gel, and it's like I practically just get tears right now just thinking about it,
Oh
because
wow.
that's the moment that I knew that people all over the world were going to be hearing this, and
Yeah.
this was music was going to be special for people all over the world, and I knew in the best sense of the word that it was going to be a hit, like a hit in terms of like really being something special for people and something really bringing joy to their lives.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's brilliant to hear you say it. And a lot of people would maybe, think, well, this is my first album. How do you ever top that? You have to have another career. But you look back on it very fondly, and I think, and it's because you have the commitment to making people happy. It's more than just showing off, or do I've got a deal? What do we do with do something commercial? Or maybe I can make some money. It seemed like you have always had these two things which I think define what art is, which is on the one side the sort of technical, perfectionist, grid-like, ordered view of the world where you're very organized, the left brain stuff, and then on the right is this very creative, sort of intuitive side. And I think when those two things are balanced well, people feel it. They feel it, and it doesn't matter about styles if that's happening. And I think when you balance those things, as I've said on the channel over and over again, that is love in effect. It unifies in a way, and it's incredible on this channel. It doesn't matter who the musicians are when we talk, and they tell their stories, and you see the emotion. I saw the emotion in you then at that point, and it's that feeling, isn't it? It's that unification of something, of being able to reach out to people, almost to put your arms around the world, isn't it? That's the feeling of it. It's an
And
incredible
that's
thing.
part of the it's part of the power and beauty of music in general,
Right.
is that music does that. And this is something that I've been talking with people about a lot, because thanks to my time learning about music therapy, um, is my level enough? Is my
Your vocals a little
Different.
bit quiet.
is that is that
That's better.
better?
That's
Yeah.
better.
Okay. Yeah. From studying music therapy, I so you edit this, right?
No, it goes out raw.
Okay.
Yeah, oh yes.
Okay. So based on my studies of music therapy, I learned some things about music and how we perceive it that really, man, were life changing for me. Okay, so the from the eye, the optic nerve goes back there into the visual cortex, and then it spreads out to the rest of the brain. Whereas the auditory nerve from the ear, before it gets to the brain, it splits and goes directly to every major center of the brain. So our brain is wired for sound in a more comprehensive way than for visualization. And that is really key, because all of our sort of high level cognitive stuff and the fight or flight or freeze or whatever, and the limbic system, our emotions, we're in every way, on every level, we are wired for sound. And music, not just sound, but musical sound, is when the brain is most activated, and that comprehensive activation of the brain also leads to a kind of an integration of the brain. And it's that where the healing power starts to kick in. And so I've become a real advocate for music therapy. I started in a degree program in music therapy as for a master's degree, and I'm traveling so much, so I'm not currently taking courses, but I still continue to study and I continue to advocate. And this is one thing I recommend if musicians are frustrated with the scene and looking for how to make a career as a musician. If you like to help people and you like health, I would recommend music therapy as something to take a look at. You know, there's one satisfaction that you can get from um, pleasing someone who's a important person in the industry and thinking, okay, this is going to open a door, or from standing in front of, you know, 1,000 people and having them cheer. That's all good. That's a good satisfaction. But there's a whole other kind of satisfaction um, for playing music for a 4-year-old severely autistic girl and getting a smile on her face, and her parents were like, oh my God, this is only the second time we have ever seen her smile. You know, there was
Yeah.
like a satisfaction that you get from that, from moments like that, that you can't get any other way.
Yeah.
The level of what you can do for people if you understand how to harness the healing powers of music, it's indescribable.
Yeah.
I, th-
I've
I think
always,
So
I think go on, Roy. Sorry, because I've said, asked a lot of questions. Yeah,
I was just going to say, I've always loved how certain music can take you back to a certain place and time, and it can make you feel a certain way, exactly how it was 40, 45 years ago. But the power that it has to be able to manifest itself and do that in any one person, it's a magical thing.
and it can also reconnect you with resources that
Right.
you had from before. It's not just the memory and the feeling of the memory, you know. So a common thing, for example, would be like in a retirement community, people will go and they'll play music, and maybe there's an old woman there who hasn't spoken a word in 3 years, and she's just been sitting there in her wheelchair, and you hit the right song and you play a song that she knows, and all of a sudden she'll get up and she'll say, I remember when I used to dance to that song with my husband. And she gets up out of her wheelchair and she starts to do the dance that they used to do. And there she is, and you could see the outline of her husband. He's like is like his form has suddenly been manifested, and she's dancing with him and she's gliding across the floor. I mean, this I know this sounds fantastical, like, oh yeah, right. But really, this music therapists have miracle stories like this all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
This is the power of music.
For sure.
yeah. I think the actual music industry as we knew it of our age is actually coming to the end. And I think the whole idea of the sort of star up at front and we all bow down and worship them is going. And I think it's actually going to be much more positive for musicians because everyone's going to become like a musician. I think it's going to become a lot more about your personal expression. And I think people like us who give ourselves to music, the educational and teaching aspect is going to become much more for us as well as the therapy aspect. And these things should just all mix together. It should be. I mean, all music's music therapy. I mean, it's like I've had mental health problems since I was about 15, 16, terrible anxiety, all sorts of things. And my therapy has always been music, always has been. And I think that's a common thing with a lot of musicians. So what else are your plans? If are you going out on tour? Will you be coming to the UK at all?
I definitely will be coming to the UK. We don't have anything scheduled at the moment, but for sure, I will definitely be making it there. Now, one thing in general that I've been doing in my life lately is I've become a little more choosy about my concerts, and I'm looking for ways of connecting with people more through education and through like online performances and things like that. And so this year I'm going to be making more use of the power of the technologies that we have to connect people. And I just love teaching. You know, some people do it to fall back on when other things don't work out, and that's fine. But if you don't love it, then it's not really gonna be fulfilling for you. But I'm blessed because I really truly love teaching. And one of the things that I like to teach, I like to teach my method of practicing, of learning. I have a whole approach to learning music that I've used throughout the years that it's been really helpful for me. And I have a word for it. The word, I know it's very clinical. It's not cool. It's not sexy or whatever. But I think it describes it really well. I call it integral optimization. And the idea is that you always want to be in the sweet spot in every way, on every level. I think I've kind of alluded to it a little bit before, but like if I'm playing, it's really unfortunate with the sound issues that I'm having, because right now I don't hear my guitar at all. Can you
No,
hear the
I
guitar?
can't hear it. And,
Okay, good.
and I think also my camera's just died. Did you see my head disappear?
Yeah.
And I've had to transfer over to the rubbish camera inside my laptop, which I actually think with the blue look with the northern lights, I'm actually quite like it. I think I look quite.
You've gone all blue note, Andy.
Yeah, I think yeah. I look I, I look like some wintry spirit. What the hell
Yeah,
has
because
happened? Technical issues.
right now my guitar's cutting. It's weird
Can you
because
hear?
every time I say that the guitar's cutting in and out, then it stops. Because I'm trying to troubleshoot here because I want to do some playing. Is it consistent right now?
It's okay just now. Yeah, it might be
Or
something
did
to
it
do with
just
them.
cut out?
Yeah,
For
no,
me, it just cut out.
it might just be the microphone setting where you have the a filter on it.
Something's wrong with the listening setup that I have here, and I don't know what it is.
Right.
So anyway,
Yeah.
so let's say
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Absolutely. And I don't know what to say really. I just
Just a little bit of improv there.
a
Wow.
little bit. Gee, that.
Yeah,
I
that's the
mean, you
stuff.
you were amazing 40 years ago, but you're better now. I just think the connection. It's well, it's incredible. My head stood on end. I mean, I think part of it is actually knowing that you're doing that for us right now, and knowing it's happening now, and I'm just sat there going, "Oh my God!" It's just, but yeah, that's incredible. And there was some medieval stuff in there. It's going way past the
Mm.
jazz. You're going way back in time, Stanley, with that. Right back to the Egyptians at some point. It's like,
Well, I like to approach it. I like to start from scratch, and there are a lot of possibilities out there. Let me just show you something that I think I can pull up, um, that'll give you an idea of how I explore the options for the different harmonic possibilities. So first I'm going to go to, okay, here's a link. Okay, here we go. Actually, no, that's not the right link. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's clear all this out. Okay, so I've got a screen here that, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. So this is on my website. Um, so these are all what I call chord types. I have this system that I call the Jordan chromatic system, and it uses something that is already commonly out there called integer pitch class notation, but I have my own way of building that into a whole system. So for example, like if I go 0, 1, let's say I'm in the key of E. So whatever the root you're in, that's 0. So we start with 0 instead of 1. So 0, 1, that's the semitone. 0,
Right.
2 is a major second. 0, 3, and we go all the way up to 0, 11. Right? So those are our 2-note combinations. Then we go into the 3-note combinations, and we have familiar things that everybody knows, like for example, 0, 3, 7. That's a minor triad. 0, 4, 7. That's a major triad. But then we have things like 0, 4, 6, which is a major triad with a flatted fifth. No one ever really talks about that chord, but it's an amazing chord. You can have a minor chord with a flatted 6 that's diminished, 0, 3, 6. But why not a major? Well, one interesting thing here is with the 0, 3, 6, we can see that that's symmetrical. You go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can see that it's the same interval. Whereas if we just call it a diminished triad or using the standard system, then it's not obvious that that's symmetrical. You have the 0, 4, 8. Right? So with that, you can see also the symmetry, 0, 4, 8, and then after 8 would come 12. Let me see if I can figure out how to also show me while I'm playing this, because I want you to see the screen, but I also want you to see how I'm playing this. Hold on just a second. See if I can figure this out here.
All right.
Okay, is that a little bit better?
That's pretty good there, Stanley. Yeah, if you could just bring the camera down. That's it. Yeah, so to see
Bring
what's
the
going on with
camera
your
down,
hands.
you said?
Yeah, just so I can see what's going on with your hands.
Okay. Okay.
Excuse me.
Okay, is that
Yeah,
better?
that's more like that's great. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so we have the standard triads. This family that we're looking at, all these chord types have a root, a third, and a fifth. So see 1, 3, 5. These are standard diatonic numbers, just saying that it's a root, some kind of a third, and some kind of a fifth. So that
Right.
gives us this whole family. But what about this? What about a root, a second, and a seventh? That
Mm.
gives us 0 to 11. It's a gorgeous chord. It's beautiful. Why
Yeah.
doesn't anybody play that chord as a chord? I mean,
Right.
you could call it, we could call it a major seventh or a major nine chord with no third and no fifth. Or we could also call it a minor major nine with no third and no fifth. That's the problem with the standard system. We have
Mm.
to talk about all these notes that aren't even there. And then the problem with, if you give this to a jazz musician and you mention these notes that aren't even, that you don't even want to play, they're
Mm.
going to play those notes. Jazz
Yeah.
musicians are going to add notes anyway,
Right.
so you definitely don't want to tell them about notes that we shouldn't be talking about here. So anyway, one of the things about this system then is that I can name any combination of notes. And this goes on and on. I've got the 3-note combinations. Oh, here's another really nice one, 0, 4, 11. So that's like a major seventh with no fifth, one way to
Right.
think about it. And I can voice that. I can play it like this. So I learned how to actually voice that like a regular chord.
Yeah. Bearing in
And
mind, of course, you're tuned to fourths as well, aren't you, Stanley?
yeah, so I'm tuned to fourths, and so if people are looking at the neck trying to understand, then it's going to look a little different. But it also makes it easier, because if I
Mm.
play this like this, and then I play it over here, same fingering over here,
Gotcha. Yeah.
same fingering here. So when you're exploring harmony on this level, it definitely helps to have a tuning like this. And incidentally, 0, 7, 11, that's another one of my favorites. Right? Okay, so this 0, 7, 11 is actually the inversion of 0, 4, 11. And when
Right.
I say inversion, I don't mean inversion in the standard sense, but inversion in the sense of upside down.
Yeah.
Because here, with the 0, 4, 11, we have a 0, 4, and on top of that, we're stacking a 0, 7. That's when we get from 4 to 11, right? So
Hmm.
here we have a 0, 7, and on top of that, we stack a 0, 4. So
Yep.
so if I take this and I combine the two together, then I get 0, 4, 7, 11, and that's the major seventh chord.
Right.
So that tells us that the major seventh chord itself is inversionally symmetrical. And so the chord has the same intervals upside down. And so I could do something like, I could play like, I could play perfect strict contrary motion within that chord because the chord has that property of being inversionally symmetrical. Okay, we
Hmm.
move on. We get into the 4-note combinations. There's just so many. There's just so much here. And then
Yeah.
we get into the 5-note combinations. We get into the 6 notes, 7 notes, 8 notes, 9 notes. Like remember that scale? Remember when I said on the D7 I could play a 10-note scale?
Right.
Um, so let's find that. So here, it would be, if D were the root, then it would be everything except 5 and 11, because 5 would be the perfect fourth of D, and then 11 would be the major seventh of D. So it's everything except these two notes. So
Yeah.
everything except 5, 11. So it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here it is. So here is that 10-note scale that I could play over a D7 chord or over any dominant seventh chord. 0 is the root, so 0 in this case would be D, but it doesn't matter. So if I click on that, it takes me to a dedicated page for this chord type. So each one of these chord types, there's about 1,300 of these. and each one of them has its own page. So this page gives me a lot of information about it. I can see that it's inversionally symmetrical. I can see the structure in various ways. I don't have time to explain all this, but all these things that I can open up here. Let's open this one up here, right here. Subset chord types by family. So this gives me a whole bunch of information about it. And this tells me what's inside of it. So let's say, for example, I'm looking for what are all the major triads that I can play inside of this scale. So I do a search for 047 because that's the major seventh, major triad. And so I get this line here. And it tells me that 0, 2, 3, 6, 8, 9, those are all the roots that I can play a major triad from. So if D is 0, and then we have 2, which is going to be an E natural, and then 3, that's going to be an F natural. That makes it a D7 sharp 9. And then I can do 6, that's a G sharp. And then an 8, that's going to be a B flat major triad. Right? And then I have a 9, which is a B. And that turns it into a D13 flat 9. And also we can see that this 0, 2, 3, well, the 6, 8, 9 is another 0, 2, 3, just 6 higher. So all the symmetries pop out at you. So I've got these 6 major triads that I can play over this chord. But let's say that there's some other really interesting chord type that I want to play. Let's say, for example, 0, 2, 6, 7. Let me look for a 0 because I really love that one. 0, 2, 6, 7. Okay, so here it is. So look, there's 3 of them that 6 of them that I can play. So I can go. And when I'm actually playing those, in this case, all I did was go up and down, right? But I can also open it up and play an open position voicing of it. For example. And then, so all of those can be played over that D7. So let's say I'm doing a 2-5-1.
Fantastic.
So there's just so much material that's available just from sort of opening these things up. And then the other thing, as you see, there's just so many others that I can find in there. So there's no end to the possibilities. And that's just one of these tabs. So all these tabs have like information about them. And then let's suppose that I want to find ways of actually voicing it in fourth tuning. So this first link here takes me to another page. So this is an index page of voicings in fourth tuning. So each one of these links takes me to a page of guitar voicings based on this 10-note scale. So all of these pages are voicings of the same 10-note scale. It just goes on and on and on. In fact, the number of pages that are in this whole website is about 570,000. So an enormous amount of material, but I try to organize it in such a way to where you can go to the thing that you want. So let me give you an example of being able to find something. Okay, let's say, and I don't have time to explain all the particulars here, but let me take something that's pretty symmetrical here. These subchroma modal systems, that has to do with, like, in the same way that if we're in the chromatic system where you have the numbers 0 through 11 for the 12 tones, well, now we're in a 10 note scale. So if we make that our whole universe for the time being, then we have the numbers 0 to 9 referring to the numbers of that scale. Okay, so within that, I call that the subchroma system. So within that, we have these numbers up here. And so I'm going to pick one that's pretty symmetrical. Let's say 0, 2, 4, 6. So it's going to be 4-note. I'm going to play 4-note chords. And they're going to skip. Actually, no, let me do 0, 3, 6, 9. I'm going to find 0, 3, 6, 9. But actually 0, 3, 6, 9, that's not going to be the subchroma prime form. It's actually going to be, because after 9 comes 0, so it's going to be 0, 1, 4, 7. I need to look for 0, 1, 4, 7. So that's this. And the reason is because if I take a 1 and I go up 3, and then I go up 3, and I go up 3 more, that's going to be 10. And 10 is the same as 0. Because remember, we're in the 10 system now. Okay, so now I found the right one. And now I'm going to pick this because I like, this is the voicing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a 4-note chord, but then out of that 4-note chord, I'm going to play a voicing of that 4-note chord. So now these numbers are in relation to the 4-note chord. Okay, so now we're in the system of 0 to 3, okay, inside the 4-note chord. So what this says is you pick some note out of the chord, you skip one, and then you play the next note after that, and you play the next note after that, and then you skip one, and then you play the next note after that. Okay, so that's a nice symmetrical voicing with respect to the 4-note chord. And see, what I've done here, I think, is making a contribution because I've defined voicing in a way that's independent of the chord being voiced. Like normally if someone says, oh, I've got some voicings for you. Oh, really? Let me check them out. And there's going to be, well, voicings of what? Oh, they're voicings of major sevenths. So everything has to normally be voicings of something. But I've defined a voicing independently of the chord that's being voiced. And I can tell you that 0, 2, 3, 5 was one of my favorite voicings of a 4-note chord type. So let's go ahead and pick it. So now we have string assignments, and the string assignment 1, 2, 3, 4 just means it's going to be 4 adjacent strings. That's all. So now I go ahead and click on that, and now we have the actual page of the actual voicings. So this is one of 570,000 pages of voicings. So remember, I'm in D. D is my root, and so this is in fourth tuning. The columns are strings, the rows are frets, and so this could be anywhere on the neck where these numbers are correct. So this has to be a D somewhere. So if I play it here, 10th fret of my low E string, then it would be. So it'll be.
Right.
And the exclamation mark here just means that that's a strong dissonance because we have an octave plus a half step. And anytime you have that, then that, I'm calling that a strong dissonance. So it's not that you can't play it, but just, maybe handle with care. Well, I see that almost all of these have strong dissonances. But if you look at this next row, like, look, that doesn't have any strong dissonances on it. So let's play the second row. I have a sort of tongue-in-cheek term that I use for that. I call it pop safe. Like I don't know if you guys are old enough, but in the early days of the internet, they had like web safe colors. There was like a limited palette because it would show the same on any browser. So this is the same idea. These are pop safe, which is kind of funny because I'm not guaranteeing that these are going to work in a pop song. But hey, if people actually learn this stuff and use this stuff, maybe we can evolve pop music to another level, and that would be great because that would contribute to the edification of the human mind and spirit, and maybe human beings would evolve because they wouldn't be stuck in listening to the same music.
Right.
Hey, this girl's got to try. So here we go. So let's say let's start with. Oh, by the way, and also just to keep it into one character, I use A for 10 and B for 11. Okay, so some people will use a T for 10 and an E for 11. I prefer A and B because it's more extensible. Because what happens one day we need to go up to 12. Well, what do you call that? You can't use T because T is already taken with 10. So I just like to. I know the T and E are a little more intuitive for most people, but I think that A and B and C and D and so on, however many you need, I think that's more elegant and more extensible. Okay, so let's go ahead and play these. So here's the first one. So this is going to be a D. So I'm going to play it like this. So that's actually a D minor 7th chord in an open position. And then we go to the next one up. This is going to be. So this is actually an E flat minor major 7th chord. And then the next one is. That's an E major 7th chord. These chords are beautiful. And then we go to this one. That's an F major 7. And then we go to this. That's an F sharp major 7 sharp 5. Then we go to this one. Now what we're going to find is that once we're going to get the same ones repeated. Like we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these, and then we're going to get the same ones again, a tritone higher. So this one here is the same as this one here, a tritone higher. And you see why? Because the scale itself is inversionally symmetrical. I'm not inversionally, it's transpositionally symmetrical with the interval of chromatic 6, of tritone. So anything that you can play a tritone up, and it'll be in that same scale. So we're going to have the same progression that we had before, just a tritone up. So here we have G sharp minor 7, and then we have A minor major 7, and then B flat. Okay, B flat major 7, and then B major 7. Now what I'm saying here is that all these chords will work over a D7. We're going to find out if I'm correct or not in just a minute. Okay, and then we have 10. That's a C natural from the point of view of D. So that's a C major 7 sharp 5. And then we go back to our D minor 7. Back to here. Okay, so here's my D7, and then I'm going to play all these on top of it, starting with this one. I have to relax and start over. Okay, here we go. Now I know that it sounds strange, but the more you hear it,
No, sounds great.
Incredible. That's incredible. It's not strange. It's just you've never heard it before. That's what it is.
It's just different.
It's like a new world.
But I mean, if I were to play something like all these actually sort of fit, because if I were to do something different that really doesn't fit, like that's totally different, right? From all the stuff that I just played. So even though I was working with a big vocabulary, it still is a world unto itself. Because right then, when I went out of that world, it's like, oh yeah, way different from all the stuff I just played.
Right.
So there are two axes here. As I go left and right, I'm marching each one of these through the 10 note scale. As I go vertically, I'm marching each one through itself. So for example, here I've got, this is my D minor 7. And then if I go down here to the one below it, I'm moving each note to the next note of the D minor 7. So,
Oh, wow.
and then this one, and then this one. So I can do all four of those. And then I go to the next one up, which is this, and I get, and then here, and then here. So just taking
Fantastic.
those first two. So I got. Right? And then the next one up is E major 7. But all that goes over my D7. So that's just one scale embellishing. And I noticed that the second row and the third row and the fourth row, they're all pop safe. So there's a lot of possibilities in there. Whoever thought of playing an E major 7 on top of a D7 chord? But
Well, they have now. It's incredible.
And that satisfies something that I was trying to do, which was to find things that are like unconventional, but still, when you hear it, it's not necessarily like dissonant in an aggressive way, or it's like there's so many things that are beautiful, but there's and you could totally, like, I still like to use the word pop safe. I mean, things that are pretty accessible, and you don't necessarily have to, love late Coltrane to appreciate it. But it's stuff that no one's doing, that hasn't been explored. There's a lot of stuff out there that's unexplored, but it's not all that weird. It's and also knowing how to use it. Like, you notice how I got through. This is one of 570,000 pages, but it's pretty inside sounding, and that's from a 10-note scale,
Yeah, yeah, I know.
And just the fact that it's a 10-note scale is already really out there. And yet I found some stuff within the 10-note scale that's not all that strange. And so that's one of the things that excites me about this, is opening up these new areas and making it, easy enough for musicians to explore, but not making it totally unaccessible.
That's incredible. Incredible, Stanley. Absolutely incredible.
Oh, thank you. Let me show you guys where this is, just so that people can find it. So if you
and I'll put the link down below. I've actually had a look around, and I ended up there was you'd taken the periodic table and created pitch classes out of the periodic table, which was outside, which was microtonic, and then you were pointing out, because the periodic table can work, in terms of the atomic number, of the atom, but also you get classes of chemicals which group together vertically, and it's you're an explorer, and I think some of the viewers may be going, what was that? And what that is a master musician. You've just gone inside the mind of a master musician there, and that is incredible. And I kept up with most of it. One of the things I grasped from that is that your system is taking care of a lot of variables that normal harmony doesn't bother with. For example, chord voicing, because that makes such a difference, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
it's like, and there's no system apart from saying you go, like 135 and then 351, and there's sort of the inversions, but it's not about that, is it? Because you're dealing with the voicings in a very systematic way and considering how they work harmonically. Because I always felt with harmony that there's more than just the note and the chord in terms of what makes that have an emotional effect, because there's what's relative next to it and what we moves, and all that seems to be contained within your system. What about rhythm? How do, because also obviously if, the a note's dissonance or consonance is also based upon how long you play it for. Do you have any systems in terms of rhythm, dare we ask?
Do, yeah. I do. Yes, there's an image in here, and I'm not sure how to get to it, or actually, I think I can. Okay. So I have I'm developing an online school that I call Integral Arts Academy, and so like this is the home page of Integral Arts Academy. Like you can get here from StanleyJordan.com. It's one of the main links, and then I click on this, and this is some stuff that's not really currently in use for my students, but it's something that's coming. I use this for myself. If you look at these, you see these are basically essentially chord voicings, similar to the ones that we were just looking at a few minutes ago. But if you see, notice that these are actually in 3D, right? And so this is actually, so remember what you saw before was a matrix of of chord voicings. So you had
Mm.
rows and columns.
Yeah,
So that's a 2D array of chord voicings. Well, what if you had a 3D array of chord voicings? So that's this
fantastic.
right here. And if you notice, all the colors on here are similar. And then you go to that pane down there, you notice that the colors are a little bit different.
Right.
Um, and so that's the whole extension of what I was just showing you. But then we can also go, okay, this is another thing. This is a bunch of scales grouped together. I wish I had more time to explain this. There's just so much here.
If
But
you
the thing
if
that
you
you
want
were
to come
asking
back,
about
Stan, I
rhythm.
mean,
Yeah,
because
I have
you're
to
Okay,
come back.
if you want to
we
come
can
back,
pick
you
a
could come
topic.
back anytime. You just message me.
Okay. All
And
right. Thank
also,
you.
I was thinking that what will be incredible is that we can actually build an audience into this, and and we can get them to reach out. They can also drop a little bit of money into your, so you actually get paid for doing this, which would be very interesting. But I would love to talk to you about, because the feeling I got of watching you play in real time was incredible, and it would be lovely to bring some people in to experience that, and then be able to chat, but also to be able to
Yeah,
watch you
thank you.
improvise in that way. And I think the
And you were.
music exists in a different place in this realm.
Mhm.
It's an incredible experience, Stanley.
Thank you. And you were asking about
Yeah.
rhythm. I was trying to find a page that I don't know why it didn't come up on the links that I was looking at, but there is, I have worked out a whole concept of rhythms. That's where I can group rhythms into families, and I can't get there from here right now. It would take too long to call it up. And I thought I had a screenshot of it,
I
but
really
I
want to
can't
know.
get to take a
It's
screenshot. But
I mean,
but there
I
is
mean, we're
something
we're
else.
we're coming up to we're coming up to the 2 hour mark, and this has been an epic of really, really incredible. And I just feel like
Yeah.
I've found like a wormhole into something that is just it's just incredible. And I know where Roy's coming from. His mind's blown at the moment because it's
I'm
just
inspired. I'm inspired again. This is what it's about. I've been looking for some.
yeah, it's just that it's just the creative freedom, of just being with someone who has no bounds. That doesn't get fooled into just doing what everyone else does. It's like it's you have a bravery in almost. Do you know what I mean, Roy? Of just going,
Oh yeah,
I'm
definitely
going my
do.
own way, And I'm exploring this, and a lifetime of you doing this has just created its own universe, and it looks like a universe. Look at it.
Well, I've
Yeah.
gone down these rabbit holes for so long, so it's great to talk to people who are interested in this stuff that I've been exploring for all this time. So, and I know we're getting short on time, but we can explore this more later. But I just wanted to show you briefly something here. We're actually looking at what I'm calling the celestial calendar. So this is a date from the past. It's 2023, October 7th. Actually, let's come up and let's go up and look down. I don't know if the audio and video are in sync, but notice. So we're in E Dorian.
Right.
Okay, and I've assigned tones to the different celestial bodies. Okay, so basically planet number equals scale degree. So Mercury is the first planet, so that's the first degree of the scale. And then Venus is the second planet. Then the third planet would be Earth or Moon. In this case, it's going to be Moon. And so we go all the way up. So the ninth up there, that's the ninth planet, that's Pluto. Come on, we got to give Pluto some love too. Then the other thing is that the sun, now this is arbitrary because in my app, this is an app that I made. In the app, you can assign any planet to any note you want. But I like this particular assignment. And so what I've done is that the sun is in the fifth, an octave below. So if you notice, on the third beat of the measure, we play the sun. Bong. And so the way that this works is every day is one measure. Because if you look at these numbers, the numbers increment every measure. So there's November 15th, November 16th, November 17th. So we go 12, so it goes like this. It goes like midnight, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., midnight, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., right? And then these little diddle, 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 those are the hours. So 16th note triplets gives us a really cool swing groove, right? But it's also giving us the hours. And incidentally, in my app, I'm using Blender for the 3D modeling and animation, but the part that's the user interface and the part that's got all the planetary data and all that's in APL. So I have a TCP IP link between Blender and APL. So I do most of my programming in APL, but Blender's programmed in Python, so I have to do some Python programming in order to link Blender and APL. But to me, Python is cool, but it's one of the best of the sort of middle level languages. But APL is so much more powerful. It's a whole other, if you guys were like, if this were a software thing, I'd be going on and on about APL, how the world needs to know it. But anyway, that's another subject. So here we go with Mercury. Let me turn on Mercury, and you'll see that Mercury will be the first degree of the scale. And there's going to be a point where when Mercury comes between the Earth and the Sun, those right there, those two, they hit at the same time. That's a conjunction. Okay, let's bring in Venus. Now, I made the orbits evenly spaced, so because of that, the angles are a little bit distorted. So you have to take that into account. But for our purposes, I think it makes things a lot simpler. Let's bring in Venus. That's nice. Nice little motif. Ba, 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 ba. Let's bring in the moon. So the moon is going to be the third. And it's going to change a little bit every day. Let's bring in Mars. That's the 4th degree. Let's bring in Jupiter, the 5th. Let's bring in Saturn, the 6th. Ooh, nice. Uranus. And by the way, those drones in the background that you hear, those are the same notes, but they tell us how far we are from each celestial body relative relative to the total maximum and minimum. So they're normalized. And if you notice, the drones are quiet now because we're kind of far away. We're at this point, last February 2024, we were far away from pretty much everything else in the solar system. Okay, let's bring in Neptune. So that's the octave. Da, 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 da. I think it's just so beautiful. Let's bring in Pluto. And this thing right here, this da, 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 that's a feature that's going to be consistent for a long time, for decades. We're going to have that da, da, da. The inner planets are going to change faster. So if you were our, proverbial, 10-year-old autistic boy, with phenomenal memory, he could hear this and not even look at it and tell you exactly what date this is. Because everything that you hear, everything that you see is being sonified. And what our 10-year-old would do is listen to the outer planets first. And that would narrow it down. And it's cool to check it out from different angles too, Right now, the vantage point is what's called Null Island. You see where that is? That's the place where the longitude and latitude are 0. So it has the same longitude as Greenwich Mean Time. And it has the latitude of like Sierra Leone, where my son-in-law is from. It's like right in that same latitude. But I could make these anywhere. I could move that vantage point, and I could have multiple ones of these playing at the same time. So it could be like row, row, row your boat from different points of view all at the same time. So anyway, that just gives you a taste of, let me just show you one more thing before I quit. Let's go ahead, I'm going to jump a month later. And you're going to hear that the planets are going to get louder, the drones. So now we're into April last year. The is loud because Mercury, we're close to Mercury. Okay, let's jump another month ahead. Jump another month ahead. Another month. Now the drones are really loud. So we just passed my birthday, July 31st. The planets were really loud. Let's jump ahead another month. And we're going to take it up to today. So the fact that the planets are louder is not just something that you can objectively observe with your ears, but there's an excitement. There's a building of that swelling, that crescendo. It's like, this is so exciting. We're near the other planets now. And this relates to what I was saying before, how the ear is plugged into every part of the brain. So we feel the excitement of it because that part of our brain is directly receiving that information as well. And this is part of the reason why I think that sonification makes us smarter, because we're using more of our brain. Okay, November, December. So we're getting close to today's date. The melody is really nice right here.
Yeah.
I could hear this like on an African, like marimba.
Yeah.
And here we get to, this is today. And now we have what they're calling the planetary parade. And so there's a point of view. I'm not sure what the point of view exactly is, but there's a point of view where it all makes sense from the Earth, where we can look. We're very close to Mars. The moon just passed Mars the other day, but now at this point, we're already almost a couple of weeks later than that. But if you look up in the sky, right after the sun sets, and remember the angles are a little bit distorted, but Mercury's far enough away, the angle's far enough away where you should be able to see Mercury. There's Mercury. And you look up and you're going to see Venus and Saturn. Uranus and Neptune you can't see, but you're going to see Venus and Saturn and then Jupiter, and then you're going to see Mars. So that's the planetary parade that everybody's talking about. So you see it here, but also you heard it.
Wow, fantastic.
So I thought of that because you were talking about the thing I did with the sonification of the ionization energies of the chemical elements. So that's similar, but it's on a smaller scale, right? This is just the same kind of relationships on a larger scale. And again, our ear can hear it in a way that our eye is so clinical, but the ear feels it. Through your ear, you grasp it on so many other levels. So a big part of what my work is these days is trying to take the possibilities of sonification and use that to explore science in a way where it's not even really science like people think of it as a technical, dry subject, but thinking of it as just understanding the natural world,
Right.
you know? And we had the music of the spheres, Pythagoras and the music of the spheres. And Pythagoras, the way he thought of it is that the planets were like strings of a harp. And so in that sense, it's analogous to notes of a scale. And so if that's how we're thinking of it, that's pretty much how I did it here. And so what I'm doing here, I think, is the realization of what Pythagoras was already talking about in the music of the spheres. And then you had Kepler with the harmonium universalis, or whatever he called it. But again, they didn't have the technology yet to render it. And so they could talk about it. And Kepler came up with the laws of planetary motion and all that, but they didn't have the technology to directly render it, you know. And I think that a lot of the science and the math and the science and all this sort of smart topics have always been done in a visual representation, because ever since the Gutenberg revolution, we've had this, the term I've heard for this is the ocular centrism, this idea that the eye should predominate. and that all the really smart information is visual information. Well, we've had that false belief as a sort of an unintended consequence, a side effect of the Gutenberg revolution, because printed information is all visual. But now we have all the equivalent technologies for audio, and so now it's time for the ear to catch up. And I think that when the ear catches up, then all of these things that we're doing, whether it's science, philosophy, whatever, these things are going to be done in a more auditory way, and therefore in a more holistic and a more integral way. And it's time now to reintegrate all of our sensory modalities so that we can finally kick in and hit our stride as a species. This is it. This is make it or break it. And let's not go down trying. Let's at least try. And I think that a lot of the separation that we're witnessing in the world is at least aggravated by this ocular centrism, because the eye, that's the function of the eye. The eye has this function of separation, of differentiation. The eye is better at that than the ear. But the ear has this skill, this talent for unification and for frequency and time, for perception of time and frequency, especially relative time and relative frequency. And so much of the information is all about vibes. It's all about vibrations. So we've been missing the sense that tunes us in to the most juicy, sacred information that's coming at us. So by bringing the ear on board, we can get there. And so the whole project of expanding our musical vocabularies opens the door for using music instrumentally, no pun intended, to help with some of these other, endeavors in life. So then finally, the one final thing that I want to say, because I do want to mention, all this comes together for musicians when we have a method of learning. And I started talking about this before, because I was talking about the what I call the integral optimization, like being in the sweet spot, right? And I'm going to be teaching this. I'm going to be doing an online 4-hour seminar of my method on February 22nd. I don't know when you're going to release this, but if it's before then, I do want people to know, because they can link to that. There's a charge for it, but I've been doing these for 20 years, and I've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from people. It's all the best things I know about efficient learning. And the point of that is that when you have a method of efficient learning, it goes beyond just the craft of music, but it's a way of not only learning the external behavioral side of being able to play what it is you're trying to learn, but also the internal experiential side. Like when I'm up on stage at that gig, I want it to be an amazing experience for me, and I practice toward that experience.
Yeah.
And a lot of times musicians, we spiral downward because the experience isn't good, and then that affects the performance. And then so I want to talk about how to get outside of that. Basically, one of the founders of neurolinguistic programming said, hey, the most phobias are caused by a single traumatic experience, like one traumatic experience. Like I know someone who is deathly afraid of elevators. Well, why? Because one time he got stuck in an elevator, and that's all it took. And he just looks at the door of the elevator, and this whole thing takes over. It's this ingrained response. So I want to know, is there a positive experience that's equally powerful and equally profound, so that once you've had that experience, from now on, you can play giant steps? You know what I mean? Like, can you take that power of music assisted learning and apply that to actually learning music, right? That's the essence of my method applied to music, but you can apply it to other things besides music. So the link is going to be to my course, and I'd love for people to join me on that if they want to explore that.
Stanley, can we keep this
Fantastic.
going, because it's the sort of things I've been talking about on my channel, and the
I
idea
know,
of
I
bringing
know.
aesthetics
Yes.
into the discussion and actually putting that up front and not having it philosophy sort of pushing it to the back and seeing it. I believe aesthetics, which is our appreciation of the beauty of the world, is the
Mhm.
building block of all things. I've done a video talking about a different aspect of this today. And then me and Roy, before you came on, when you gave us that half an hour to chat, we have a band together, and we go, "What do we do next?" Because I keep saying this idea of us having a band and putting albums out isn't where the creativity is anymore. And then you come in, and over this, like it's been about 2.5 hour chat. It has we've arrived at somewhere that I'm actually quite blown away because you're onto something. I can't even put it into words to be. I need to go away and think about it, to be honest, because I
Mhm.
think after all the complexity that you've gone through and all the options and all the what when you just then I suddenly realized that it's like playing music, but being aware of our place in the universe, both in terms of time and space, whilst we're playing music.
Mm.
That's the integration I felt then.
Mhm.
And it's very strange that because I'm in my room so messy, I put this background up. But it's suited it perfectly, and these strange synchronizations that come
Mhm.
together, which I think the word for them is integration. This has been very profound, I think, and
Mm.
you're doing something incredible creatively. That's what all I can say.
Yeah,
Oh,
That's
seriously.
what
so
I
glad to
feel.
hear
You're
that.
doing something incredible. It really is. I don't know what more to say, and if I could be a part of it with my channel and my audience, because they're an incredibly exploratory lot, the people who watch this channel.
Mm.
You
I'm
know,
so glad to hear that, and I'm glad to hear about all the things you're doing and with exploring the aesthetics and all that. And that's one of the things that interested me in talking with you. You know, when some of the things that you say when you're talking about jazz and the kind of aesthetics around jazz, and I think we need to upgrade how we think about things, and that is in turn going to make the whole music scene healthier.
Mm.
It's
totally
going to
right. You are
Yeah.
absolutely right, and you've actually got
it's
some
going to support
solutions.
musicians and listeners. It's going to just people are going to care more about music again like they used to. I'm just excited to bring that back. So thanks for
They
all you're
they
doing.
they, they are going to care about it, and they're going to care about it in a different way because they're going to own it and they're going to be closer to it. And like
Hmm.
you say about that autistic child smiling, it's those things rather than reaching millions of people in a small way, it will be reaching pockets of people in a much deeper way. And I felt that in my YouTube. I've got my whole. I mean, there's a few thousand people watching this, but we are a little community here now, and the musicians are coming to me, and they're really interested in it. You'd be surprised the amount
Mm.
of stellar musicians that have said they want to really be involved in this. Who knows where I'm going with this, but I really feel that you are an integral part of it, Stanley. I don't want to
Yeah.
say it because you're a bloody living legend. It's like, but if you want to, and Roy would be a very good cohort for you. I'll send you some of his music. You check out what he's doing because
Okay,
I
thank
brought
you.
him in. He was the right guy to bring in, and we could be like the UK cohort of your thinking. And who
Love it.
knows? I don't really know where it's going, but that's what I feel at the end of this video. And this has been an epic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has been an epic, but that's been incredible. Absolutely, you're a
Thank you
master
so much.
musician. You're a master musician. I can't say anymore. I feel like I've been in the. Oh, I've just knocked my camera off again.
And he's excited.
Oh,
So am I. So am I. Stanley, that
have you
was
got a last?
absolutely
Have you got a
incredible.
final word? What do you think, Roy, after going through that
Oof.
experience?
That was a journey in itself. And I remember the first time that I heard you playing, Stanley, you actually took us all on a journey that night. And you've done it again. You've just done it again. Um, Absolutely incredible. So yeah, count me in.
If we can do anything to further your ideas, I will, we'll get on the email tomorrow and see what we can do. And that thing on the February the 22nd, I want to be with that and in that, and I want to be pushing people towards that and getting these ideas out because they're absolutely incredible, mind blowing. So I think we're done.
Yeah.
The
Yay.
world, Mr. Stanley Jordan, they're
Oh my gosh.
absolutely mind blowing.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Roy.
Goodbye, you
Thank you,
lot.
Stanley.
Goodbye, you lot. See you all soon. Bye bye.